The galaxy decided humanity was too dangerous to exist among them. Not because humans have the strongest weapons, not because they have the largest fleets, but because humans had something far more unsettling: ideas. The chamber where the decision was made was enormous, so large that an entire city could have fit inside it. It floated in deep space near an old dying star whose weak light glowed through massive glass panels. Thousands of species had gathered there, just like they had done for hundreds of thousands of years. This place was called the Grand Conclave, where the powerful civilizations of the galaxy decided the fate of everyone else. Today, they were deciding the fate of Earth. More than 4,000 species had sent representatives. Their shapes and bodies were wildly different. Some looked like walking stone statues, others like glowing clouds, others like giant insects or trees. But in the very back row sat a single human, Ambassador Jose Olay. He sat quietly in a simple chair that seemed small compared to the giant thrones of the elder species. For 3 days he had listened without interrupting. Speech after speech had filled the chamber. Every one of them said the same thing: humanity was a problem. A tall white creature made of bone-like branches, the representative of the ancient Dren species, stood at the center of the hall. "The charges are clear," the Dren speaker said slowly. Its voice echoed through thousands of translators. "Humanity has spread destabilizing ideas across multiple civilizations." Another alien added harshly, "Human philosophy promotes rebellion." A third voice followed, "They encourage weaker species to question authority." To humans, those words sounded strange: freedom, fairness, the right to refuse control. But to the old powers of the galaxy, these were dangerous ideas. For millions of years, the strongest civilizations had ruled the weaker ones. Younger species were expected to obey, to rent technology, and to follow rules written long before they were born. Then humanity arrived only 70 years ago. Loud, curious, friendly. Human teachers began visiting other worlds. Human music started spreading between star systems. Human books were translated into hundreds of alien languages. Soon, the younger species began asking questions. Why must we obey forever? Why can't we build our own technology? Why do the old powers decide everything? The elder civilizations hated those questions, so they placed humanity on trial. One massive armored alien from the Torvan hegemony spoke with open anger. "Humans are a disease," it growled. "Their culture spreads rebellion like a virus." Another representative, speaking through a mechanical voice amplifier, said coldly, "Human ideas are more dangerous than any weapon." Some species voted against Earth simply out of fear. They worried that if they defended humans, the powerful empires would punish them too. Through it all, Ambassador Olay said nothing. He simply listened as thousands of voices debated whether his entire civilization should be exiled. Finally, the chamber lights dimmed. The trial was over. It was the human ambassador's turn to speak. Thousands of eyes, cameras, sensors, and strange alien organs turned towards him. Many expected him to beg. Many hoped he would apologize. Jose Olay slowly stood up. He adjusted his plain dark suit and looked across the chamber. Then he said something that shocked everyone. "You're right." A wave of confusion moved through the crowd. The human continued calmly, "Our ideas are dangerous." He paused, letting the silence grow. "They are dangerous to anyone who believes power should last forever." He looked directly toward the Torvan ambassador. "They are dangerous to anyone who believes the strong should silence the weak." The chamber fell completely silent.
Olay closed the small case holding his documents. "You are free to exile us. We will not fight your decision." Then he added one final sentence, a sentence that would later echo across the entire galaxy. "But understand this clearly. Exile does not mean what you think it means for humans." And with that, the ambassador turned and walked out of the chamber. 1 hour later, the galaxy voted. Earth was officially cast out. But none of them realized something important. Humanity had just been given exactly what it needed: freedom. While the galaxy celebrated Earth's exile, humanity back home received the message, and instead of panicking, they quietly activated something called Directive Zero.
The galaxy celebrated. Across hundreds of star systems, powerful civilizations congratulated each other. The problem of humanity had been solved. The vote had been clear, overwhelming, and final. Earth was exiled. Trade routes to the solar system were immediately cut off. Diplomatic protection was removed. Massive automated beacons were placed around the edge of the system. Each beacon broadcast the same message in thousands of languages. This system is under quarantine. Do not approach. Do not communicate. To the rest of the galaxy, it was a polite way of saying one thing: humanity was finished. History showed what happened to exiled civilizations. Without trade, without outside technology, and without allies, most societies collapsed within a generation. Economies failed, governments fell, entire species slowly disappeared. The elder powers believed the same thing would happen to Earth. Many predicted humans would be gone in 50 years. But on Earth, the reaction was strangely calm. The message from the Grand Conclave arrived in a secure communication room in Geneva. A woman named Director Amina Mongi read the report carefully. She read it once, then she read it again. Around her, several officials waited nervously. The silence in the room was heavy. Finally, Director Mongi placed the report on the table. "Well," she said quietly, "that was expected." Within hours, the United Earth Council held an emergency meeting. Leaders from every nation joined the discussion. But there was no shouting, no panic, no anger. Instead, the council asked only one question: what now? After several hours of discussion, the council voted. The result was unanimous. They activated something called Directive Zero. The details were classified at the highest possible level. Only 12 people on Earth knew the full plan. But the results became visible very quickly. Factories that had been quiet for years suddenly restarted. Shipyards in orbit began pulling old spacecraft out of storage. Research centers received enormous new funding. Everywhere on Earth, scientists and engineers were reassigned to massive projects. Humanity did not protest its exile. Humanity went to work. For the first year, the galaxy watched carefully. The quarantine beacons recorded everything leaving or entering the solar system. They expected to see signs of collapse, food shortages, energy failures, political chaos. Instead, the signals from Earth remained stable, suspiciously stable. What the galaxy did not understand was something simple. Human history had always been difficult. Ice ages, global wars, pandemics, natural disasters. Again and again, humanity had faced extinction and survived. Giving up had never been an option. 5 years after the exile vote, the first stage of Directive Zero was complete. Mars was no longer a small research outpost. It had become a real colony. Domed cities spread across the red planet. Farms grew under artificial sunlight. Children were born there who had never seen Earth. Soon after, humanity expanded further. Europa, one of Jupiter's icy moons, became a massive ocean research station. Titan, orbiting Saturn, turned into a huge fuel production center. Meanwhile,
Hundreds of mining ships carved resources out of the asteroid belt. Metals, rare minerals, and fuel, everything humanity once imported from alien markets. Now they produced it themselves. The galaxy once supplied humanity with technology. Now humanity was learning to survive without it. And during that process, human scientists discovered something surprising. The alien technology given by the Galactic Accord had limits. Strange limits. Engines that could have been faster but weren't. Energy systems that wasted power. Navigation systems that avoided certain possibilities. It slowly became clear. The elder species had never shared their best technology. They had only shared enough technology. Enough to keep younger civilizations dependent. Humanity began taking those systems apart, not to copy them, but to improve them. And 12 years after exile, human engineers finished something no alien civilization had ever seen before. A completely new, faster-than-light engine. The test ship was named Mugunhwa. When the ship landed, only a few hundred people knew it existed. The pilot was Captain Seon Park. Her mission was simple: reach the edge of the quarantine zone and come back. Using Accord technology, the journey should have taken 6 days. Captain Park completed it in 4 hours. When she landed back on Earth, a crowd of silent engineers waited. She climbed out of the cockpit, removed her helmet, and smiled. It works. Humanity had just taken its first real step back into the galaxy, and nobody outside the solar system had any idea. While the galaxy believed Earth was dying behind the quarantine beacons, humanity quietly built something even more powerful than new ships, a secret network that could hear every word spoken in the galaxy.
Humanity did not rush back into the galaxy. That would have been foolish. The Elder Empires still controlled most of known space, and the quarantine around the solar system was still active. Hundreds of automated stations watched the borders, broadcasting warnings to every passing ship. But the quarantine had one weakness. It watched for ships. It did not watch for silence. In the 18th year after exile, the second phase of Directive Zero began. It was called the Prometheus Network. The plan was simple. Humanity would listen. Small relay devices were quietly launched beyond the outer edges of the solar system. Each one was no bigger than a car. They carried no weapons, no engines, and no visible transmitters. They drifted through deep space like harmless pieces of metal. To the galaxy, they looked like nothing. But each device carried extremely powerful receivers. They did not send signals, they only heard them. Soon the network spread far beyond the quarantine zone. Some relays hid inside asteroid fields. Others drifted near dead stars or inside colorful nebula clouds where natural radiation made detection difficult. Piece by piece, a silent web formed across nearby space, and the web listened. It listened to trade communications. It listened to military signals. It listened to diplomatic messages and private government channels. Humanity, officially exiled and isolated, could suddenly hear almost everything happening in the galaxy, and what they heard surprised them. The Galactic Accord looked powerful from the outside, but inside it was full of cracks. The great empires constantly argued with each other. The Torvan hegemony was expanding aggressively, absorbing smaller species into its territory. Some worlds joined willingly, others were forced. The Keth Collective, which controlled much of the galactic technology markets, was beginning to lose its grip. Some younger species had secretly started copying their rented equipment. There were whispers everywhere. Whispers of frustration, whispers of anger, and often whispers about humans. Many civilizations had not forgotten Earth. Some remembered human teachers who had once visited their worlds. Others remembered human music or books that had inspired new thoughts. Those ideas had never disappeared. They had simply been waiting. Then, 25 years after Earth's exile, something unexpected happened. One of the Prometheus relays received a message. It was encrypted, weak,
and clearly sent in secret. Human analysts carefully decoded it. The message came from a species called the Velathari. They were tall beings with silver skin and 6 bright eyes. Their ocean world existed near the border of Torvan territory. The Velathari had been one of the few species that voted against Earth's exile many years ago. Their message was short, simple, and full of uncertainty. "We remember you." A long pause followed in the message data. Then the final line appeared. "Are you still there?" Inside a secure command center beneath the mountains of Switzerland, human officials stared at the message for many minutes. No one spoke. Finally, Director Mongi gave a quiet order. "Send a reply." The response contained only one word: yes. After that, the silence ended. Within months, more hidden messages began arriving through the network. Some came from neutral civilizations who secretly disagreed with the elder powers. Others came from species that had been controlled or absorbed by the large empires. They shared information, star charts, political reports, military movements. In return, humanity shared something much more valuable: hope. By the 30th year of exile, Earth had quietly become something extraordinary: a single star system, a powerful civilization, and the silent center of a growing network of allies. But the rest of the galaxy still believed Earth was weak. They had stopped watching long ago. Behind the quarantine beacons, they thought nothing important could happen. They were very wrong. Because one quiet day, 30 years after the exile vote, a desperate signal suddenly spread across every communication channel in nearby space. It was a distress call. The Velathari homeworld was under attack, and the fleet destroying their cities belonged to the Torvan hegemony. As the Velathari planet burned and the Galactic Accord argued in meetings, one desperate message reached Earth, and Admiral Yuri Tanaka gave an order that would shock the entire galaxy.
The Velathari homeworld was dying. From orbit, the beautiful ocean planet looked like a jewel. Blue seas, green islands, and white clouds drifting peacefully across the sky. But the peace was an illusion. Above the planet floated 800 Torvan warships. Their dark armored hulls surrounded the world like a closing fist. Energy weapons fired again and again, striking cities along the coastlines. Bright explosions flashed across the surface, while massive orbital stations slowly broke apart in space. The Velathari had never built a real military. Their ships were explorers, scientists, and ocean researchers. Against a war fleet, they had no chance. Deep underground, thousands of Velathari civilians hid in emergency shelters. Families held each other while the ground trembled from distant bombardments. Their government had already done everything it could. They had contacted the Galactic Accord. They had begged for help. But the response was slow. Meetings were called. Debates began. Committees were formed. The same thing the Accord always did: nothing. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Torvan flagship, Commander Gresk watched the destruction calmly. The Torvan were large creatures covered in thick armored plates. Their culture respected only strength, and weakness invited conquest. To Gresk, this was not cruelty. This was simply the natural order of the galaxy. The strong ruled, the weak were ruled. The Velathari planet would soon belong to the Torvan hegemony, another species added to their empire. But suddenly, one of the sensor officers made a strange sound, a sound of confusion. "Commander, I am detecting something." Gresk turned slowly. "What kind of something?" The officer stared at the sensor screen. His voice dropped slightly. "Commander, the ships are broadcasting identification. And they are human." For a moment, the entire bridge froze.
Humans? That could not be right. Humanity was quarantined. They were supposed to be isolated and weak. And even if they had ships, how could they travel this far so quickly? Before Gresk could speak again, another officer interrupted. "Commander, the human fleet is opening a communication channel on all frequencies." Gresk leaned forward slowly. "Put them on screen." The large display flickered. A human woman appeared. She looked older, with gray hair tied neatly behind her head. Her expression was calm and focused, as if nothing unusual was happening. Her uniform carried only one symbol, a blue circle with a white star. She spoke clearly. "This is Admiral Yuri Tanaka of the United Earth Defense Fleet." Her voice sounded steady and controlled. "I am addressing the Torvan forces currently attacking the Velithari homeworld." Gresk growled quietly. "You are exiled. You have no authority here. Leave this system immediately, or your ships will be destroyed." The human admiral did not react. Instead, she spoke with quiet certainty. "We are not here for your permission." She paused. "We are here because someone asked for help." Her eyes hardened slightly, and everyone else refused. Then she said something that would soon spread across the entire galaxy. "These are humans' rules. Rule 1, we protect those who cannot protect themselves. Rule 2, we do not start wars, but we finish them." She lifted one finger. "Rule 3, we forgive our enemies once." Her gaze locked directly on the Torvan commander. "This is your one chance. Withdraw your fleet, leave the Velithari world, and every one of your crews will go home alive." The Torvan bridge fell silent. Then Commander Gresk began to laugh, deep, loud, confident. "You bring 200 ships against 800, and you make threats?" He leaned closer to the screen. "You are either very brave or very stupid, human." Admiral Tanaka simply answered quietly, "I know exactly what you are." Then she ended the transmission, and the Torvan commander gave the order to attack. 800 warships turned their weapons towards the human fleet. The largest space battle in a century had just begun. The Torvan expected the battle to last seconds, but what happened over the next 11 minutes would change the balance of power in the entire galaxy.
The Torvan fleet opened fire. 800 warships unleashed everything they had. Bright beams of energy flashed across space. Missiles streaked forward like swarms of burning insects. Heavy kinetic rounds blasted toward the 200 human ships. Commander Gresk watched with satisfaction. No fleet could survive that much firepower. But something strange happened. The human ships moved. Not slowly, not carefully. They moved impossibly fast. Human vessels twisted through space with sharp turns that should have torn them apart. They accelerated and stopped in ways that made Torvan targeting systems struggle to keep up. Weapons locked onto one position, and the human ships were suddenly somewhere else. "Adjust targeting," Gresk barked. The Torvan gunners fired again. More beams, more missiles, but every shot missed. The human fleet flowed through the battle like water slipping around rocks. Then the humans finally fired back, but their weapons were different. Instead of massive destructive blasts, thin pulses of light shot across space, fast, precise, and strangely quiet. The first Torvan warship suddenly lost power. Its engines went dark. A second later, another ship's weapons shut down. Then another, and another. The human attacks did not explode or tear ships apart. They struck specific points: engines, weapon systems, communications arrays. Every hit disabled something important. Within minutes, Torvan ships began drifting helplessly through space.
Damage report, Gresk demanded. The answer came quickly. Engines offline, shields down, targeting systems destroyed, but hull integrity remained stable. The commander stared at the reports. The humans were not destroying the ships, they were turning them off. The battle continued for 11 minutes. In those 11 minutes, something unbelievable happened. 800 Torvan warships lost their ability to fight. One after another, they floated powerless in orbit. Not a single one had exploded. Not a single Torvan crew member had died. Meanwhile, the human fleet remained untouched. Not one ship had been hit. The Torvan weapons simply could not keep up with them. Finally, the battlefield became quiet. Hundreds of disabled warships drifted silently around the Velithari planet. Commander Gresk stared at the main display. For the first time in his long military career, he felt fear. A communication request appeared on the screen from the human flagship. He hesitated for several seconds before answering. Admiral Tanaka appeared again. She looked exactly the same as before, calm, focused, almost bored. "Your fleet is disabled," she said evenly. "Your crews are alive. Life support systems remain operational." Behind her, human officers quietly monitored the battlefield. "You will be able to repair your ships once rescue teams arrive." Gresk said nothing. The human admiral leaned forward slightly. "That was Rule 3, your one forgiveness." Her voice became colder. "You will now leave Velithari space. Go home. Tell your leaders what happened here." She paused, then added quietly, "And tell them we chose not to kill you." Her eyes locked onto his. "If you attack this world again, we will not make that choice twice." The channel closed. The human fleet remained in orbit for several hours. During that time, something unexpected happened. Human medical ships descended to the surface of the Velithari world. Doctors treated injured civilians. Engineers stabilized damaged buildings. Human soldiers carefully carried Velithari children out of collapsed shelters. The Velithari Prime Minister, a tall, silver-skinned woman with tearful eyes, finally stood face to face with Admiral Tanaka. She struggled to find the right words. "Why?" she asked softly. "We are a small species, a small world. Why risk everything to save us?" Admiral Tanaka looked out over the ruined city. Smoke drifted into the sky. Rescue teams worked quietly in the distance. Then she answered simply, "Because you asked. That has always been enough for us." But far away, across the galaxy, recordings of the battle were already spreading through communication networks, and billions of beings were watching human ships defeat 800 warships without killing a single enemy, watching humans save strangers they had never met, watching something the galaxy had almost forgotten: mercy. And for the first time in a long time, the powerful civilizations of the galaxy began to feel uneasy. Within days, the recording of Admiral Tanaka's 3 rules spread across thousands of worlds, and suddenly millions of oppressed civilizations began asking a dangerous question. What if the galaxy didn't have to stay this way? The battle lasted 11 minutes. But the consequences spread across the galaxy in 11 hours. The recordings traveled through trade networks, private communication channels, and hidden pirate broadcasts. Every species with access to a relay station eventually saw the same thing: 200 human ships, 800 Torvan warships, and the impossible result. Even more powerful than the battle itself were the words spoken before it began. Admiral Tanaka's 3 rules. Rule 1, protect those who cannot protect themselves. Rule 2, do not start wars, but finish them. Rule 3, forgive your enemies once. No one had expected those words to matter, but they did. They spread faster than any human fleet ever could. On a mining world called Cathan, workers had spent 800 years extracting minerals for the Keth Collective. They were not allowed to own ships. They were not allowed to develop new technology. Their entire civilization existed to serve someone else. One day, the workers simply stopped. Machines shut down. Mining drills went silent. When Keth supervisors demanded an explanation, the workers answered calmly, "We protect each other." It was the first time the words had been used as a protest, but not the last. Far away on the borders of Torvon space, 3 species that had been absorbed into the hegemony centuries ago began speaking secretly with one another. Individually, they were weak. Together, they were millions. They created a simple agreement called the First Pact. Its first line read, "No species shall stand alone." None of them had powerful weapons. None of them had large fleets. But they had something new: courage. And across the galaxy, something began to change. At the Grand Conclave, the elder species noticed the shift almost immediately. Emergency meetings were called. Arguments exploded across the chamber. The ancient Dren demanded peacekeeping forces to restore order. The Keth Collective suggested economic punishment for any species spreading human ideology. But the Torvon had a different solution: war. They believed fear would restore control. So the Torvon hegemony began building the largest fleet in its history. 3,000 warships, each one armed with the most powerful weapons their empire possessed. Every crew filled with experienced soldiers, and leading them was the same commander who had been humiliated at the Velithari battle, Commander Gresk. His mission was simple: destroy Earth. Erase the human example. Remind the galaxy who truly ruled. When the massive fleet finally departed Torvon space, it moved with terrible purpose. Thousands of engines burned through hyperspace as the Armada headed directly toward the solar system. They expected an easy victory. Earth had only one star system, one small civilization. Against 3,000 warships, the battle would barely last minutes. But when the Torvon fleet crossed the quarantine boundary and entered the solar system, Commander Gresk felt something he had never felt before: uncertainty. Because what appeared on his sensors did not look like a weak civilization. It looked like a fortress. Every planet, every moon, every major asteroid, thousands of automated defense platforms filled the system. Energy shields formed a glowing network around them like threads in a giant web. And behind that defensive wall, 500 human warships waited silently, each one larger, each one more advanced, each one ready. Commander Gresk slowly opened a communication channel. "This is Commander Gresk of the Torvon hegemony," he announced. "We are here to—" The response interrupted him immediately. Not a person, an automated message. Calm, polite. "Welcome to the solar system. You have entered restricted space with weapons armed. You have 11 minutes to power down your weapons and reverse course. This is not a negotiation." Commander Gresk stared at the message. Then he gave the same order he had given before: attack. But this time, the humans were not protecting someone else. This time, they were protecting home. What happened next shocked the entire galaxy even more than the Velithari battle, because when the Torvon fleet attacked Earth, humanity didn't just defend itself, it ended the war in 11 minutes again.
The Torvon fleet attacked without hesitation. 3,000 warships fired at once. Energy beams flashed across the darkness. Missiles streaked forward in massive waves. Heavy kinetic weapons launched metal projectiles the size of buildings. Commander Gresk expected the human defenses to struggle. No civilization could survive that much firepower. But the solar system did not panic. Instead, the defense network activated. Thousands of platforms around planets, moons, and asteroids lit up at the same time.
A glowing web of energy formed across the system, intercepting missiles before they could reach their targets. Explosions bloomed harmlessly far away from Earth. The Torvon fired again and again. The defense network absorbed everything. Behind the shields, the 500 human warships began to move. They spread out in perfect formation, like a school of fish changing direction together. Human targeting systems locked on to the Torvon fleet. Then they fired. The weapons were the same ones used at Velithari. Precise, controlled, terrifyingly efficient. Thin pulses of energy struck Torvon's ships across the battlefield. One warship lost its engines, another lost its weapon systems, a third ship's shields collapsed entirely. Within seconds, hundreds of Torvon vessels began drifting out of formation. Commander Gresk shouted orders, "Reform battle lines! Return fire!" But it was useless. Human ships moved faster than anything the Torvon had ever seen. They accelerated, turned, and repositioned themselves with impossible precision. Every human shot hit exactly where it needed to. Engines, weapons, sensors, communications. Torvon's ships were not exploding. They were simply stopping. The massive armada slowly turned into a graveyard of powerless vessels floating through space. The battle lasted exactly 11 minutes. When the firing stopped, 3,000 Torvon warships were drifting helplessly around the solar system. Not one had been destroyed. Every crew member was still alive, but none of them could fight. Inside his flagship, Commander Gresk stared at the silent battlefield. The realization slowly settled into his mind. This had never been a battle. It had been a demonstration. A communication signal appeared across every Torvon ship. Admiral Tanaka appeared again. Her face looked older now than during the Velithari battle, but her eyes remained calm and steady. "This was not Rule 3, she said. "You already used your forgiveness." Her voice was harder than before. "This was Rule 2. We did not start this war, but we finished it." The Torvon crews watched in silence. "If your fleets attack another species again," Tanaka continued, "we will not limit ourselves to disabling your ships." Her expression softened slightly. "We do not want to be your enemy, but we will be if you force that choice." She paused. "Take your ships, go home, and think very carefully about what happens next." The transmission ended. Slowly, rescue and repair vessels began arriving from Torvon space. It took months to tow the disabled fleet away. The Torvon hegemony, once feared across the galaxy, suddenly became very quiet. For the first time in its long history, it had been defeated. Not destroyed, but stopped. And the galaxy was watching the recordings, watching the battles, watching a civilization that could easily conquer everyone, but chose not to. And across hundreds of worlds, a new thought began forming, a dangerous thought. Maybe power did not have to mean control. Maybe strength could mean something else, protection. And if that was true, then the entire structure of the galaxy was wrong. As the Torvon retreated in silence, hundreds of civilizations made a shocking decision. They began leaving the Galactic Accord, and they asked humanity to help them build something completely new. The galaxy did not change overnight. At first, the shift was quiet, but it was impossible to ignore. After the Torvon defeat, many civilizations began to realize something important. The powerful empires were not invincible anymore. For millions of years, the elder species had ruled through fear and control. Now that fear was fading. One by one, smaller civilizations started making bold choices. The first announcement came from a species that had once defended Earth during the Exile vote. They publicly declared their withdrawal from the Galactic Accord. Then another species did the same, and another. Within months, dozens of civilizations had left the Accord. Some of them joined together to form something new. They called it the Free People's Coalition. The idea behind the coalition was simple:
Every member civilization would stand as equals. No elder species, no permanent rulers, no forced obedience. Each voice would carry the same weight. When the coalition was officially announced, its leaders sent a message to Earth. They wanted humanity to join them. But more than that, they wanted humans to lead. To most species, this seemed obvious. Humanity had the strongest military technology in the galaxy. Their fleets had defeated the Torvon twice without losing a single ship. If anyone deserved to lead the coalition, it was Earth. But the human response surprised everyone. Ambassador Jose Oye, now much older, his hair gray and his face lined with age, addressed the first assembly of the coalition. Hundreds of alien representatives watched him carefully. "We will gladly join," he said, "but we will not lead." Confused whispers filled the room. Jose continued calmly. "We will not take the highest seat. We will not command your fleets. We will not control your economies." He looked around the chamber. "This coalition exists because every species here believes that power should not belong to a few. If humanity takes control, then we become exactly what we fought against." The room grew quiet. Slowly, the representatives began to understand. The coalition accepted Earth's condition. Every civilization would be equal. No exceptions. It was messy. Decisions took longer. Arguments were common. But for the first time in galactic history, the system was fair. Then humanity did something even more shocking. Earth released its technology. All of it. Faster-than-light engine designs, medical advancements, agricultural systems, energy production methods, everything developed during the 30 years of exile. The information was shared freely with every coalition member. No payments, no contracts, no restrictions. The impact on the galaxy was enormous. The Keth Collective, whose entire economy depended on renting technology to other species, suddenly faced disaster. Why pay for old equipment when better systems were now free? Within 2 years, Keth trade networks began collapsing. Their political influence faded quickly afterward. Meanwhile, more species continued leaving the Galactic Accord. Some joined the coalition. Others simply declared independence. The once powerful Accord, which had ruled the galaxy for 600,000 years, was shrinking, and the elder species were starting to panic. 1 year later, Ambassador Oye returned to a place he had not visited in decades, the Grand Conclave, the same massive chamber where humanity had once been exiled. He sat quietly in the same small seat at the back of the hall, and he watched. The elder civilizations argued loudly. The Dren blamed the Torvon blamed the Keth blamed everyone else. Through it all, Oye said nothing. He simply observed. After the session ended, a private message arrived on his communicator. It came from High Arbiter Senthi of the Dren, the ancient being who oversaw Earth's exile decades earlier. The message contained only 4 words: "What do you want?" Oye read the message carefully. Then he typed his reply. "We told you 35 years ago. You simply were not listening." He closed the communicator and walked away from the chamber. Behind him, the Galactic Accord continued arguing, still unable to understand why the galaxy was changing, still unable to see the truth. But soon, they would have no choice. 36 years after exiling Earth, the Galactic Accord finally did something unthinkable. They invited humanity back, not as a member, but as the civilization that might save them. The Grand Conclave had never been this quiet. For 600,000 years, the chamber had always been full of noise. Thousands of voices speaking at once, translators humming, representatives arguing over laws and power. Now many seats were empty. Entire rows once filled with delegates from dozens of civilizations were gone. Those species had already left the Galactic Accord. Some joined the Free People's Coalition. Others simply chose independence. The empty chairs said more than any speech ever could. At the center of the chamber stood High Arbiter Senthi of the Dren. The ancient being looked older than ever. Its white, bone-like body trembled slightly as it addressed the remaining representatives. The situation was clear. The Accord was failing. For centuries, it had ruled the galaxy through control and hierarchy. Elder species commanded authority, while younger civilizations were expected to obey. But now that structure was collapsing. Trade networks were breaking. Political alliances were dissolving. More species were leaving every month. The Accord had finally realized something painful. They could not stop the change. So they decided to do something they had never done before. They asked for help. The request was sent formally through diplomatic channels. The message was addressed to Earth. 36 years after exiling humanity, the Galactic Accord invited humans back, not as a normal member, but as a reformer. They wanted Earth to help rebuild the system that had once rejected them. When the message reached Earth, the response was quiet and careful. A few weeks later, an old human man walked once again through the enormous doors of the Grand Conclave. Ambassador Jose Olenye had returned. Time had changed him. His hair was now completely white. His face showed deep lines earned through decades of work and responsibility. But his eyes were the same calm eyes that had stood in this chamber many years ago. The representatives watched him silently as he walked to the center of the floor, the same place where humanity had once been judged. He looked around the chamber slowly, at the remaining delegates, at the empty seats. Then he spoke. 36 years ago, Olenye began, I stood here while this chamber told me that humanity was dangerous. They said our ideas would bring disorder. They said the galaxy would be safer without us. He paused, letting the words settle across the hall. You were right about one thing. Our ideas are dangerous. Murmurs spread across the room. They are dangerous because they cannot be contained, he continued. You can exile a civilization. You can isolate their star system. You can pretend they do not exist, but you cannot destroy an idea. He reached into his coat and removed a small sheet of paper. Real paper. A human habit that many alien species still found strange. These are Earth's conditions, he said calmly. They are not demands. We are offering help, but these are the rules of that help. He raised the paper and began reading. First, no species shall ever be conquered, absorbed, or silenced by another civilization. If it happens, every member must respond together. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. Second, all technology shared in this accord must be open and free. No civilization may control knowledge to control others. The KEF delegates looked furious. Third, any species may leave the accord at any time. No punishments, no consequences. If the system fails them, they are free to walk away. Now the chamber was completely silent. Olenye lowered the paper slightly. Fourth, the idea of elder species as rulers is abolished. Age does not give authority. Every civilization here will have equal standing. The words struck the chamber like a shock wave. and Olenye still had one more condition left. When the elders heard humanity's final condition, they asked a single question that stunned the entire chamber. If you are this powerful, why don't you simply rule the galaxy?
The chamber remained silent. Ambassador OD stood in the center of the Grand Conclave holding the sheet of paper. The first 4 conditions had already shaken the remaining members of the Galactic Accord. Equal standing, free technology, freedom to leave, no conquest. For civilizations that had ruled for millions of years, these ideas felt almost impossible. But OD had one final condition. He folded the paper slowly and placed it back inside his coat. And 5th, he said calmly, Earth will not lead this accord. Confused murmurs spread across the chamber. The Torvon delegates looked at each other. The Keth representatives stared in disbelief. Even some younger species seemed surprised. OD continued, Humanity will not hold a permanent seat of power. We will not command fleets. We will not control trade. We will not decide the future of the galaxy. He spread his hands slightly. We will simply be another member. The chamber fell into complete silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, High Arbiter Senthi stepped forward. The ancient Dren leader had witnessed thousands of political decisions during its lifetime, but this moment confused even him. Senthi's voice carried across the chamber. There is something I do not understand. OD looked at the ancient being. You have the most powerful military we have ever seen, Senthi said. Your fleets defeated the Torvon hegemony twice. Your technology has already reshaped the galaxy. The Dren leader tilted its skeletal head slightly. Any species with that level of power would rule. It is the natural order. Senthi paused before asking the question everyone was thinking. You could rule the galaxy. Why don't you? The chamber waited. Thousands of eyes focused on the human ambassador. OD remained quiet for a moment. Then he smiled gently. Because that is not who we are. He stepped closer to the center of the room. Freedom is dangerous to those who want control. Fairness is dangerous to those who benefit from unfairness. The right to say no is terrifying to those who have never been told no before. Many delegates lowered their eyes. OD's voice remained calm but firm. Humanity did not become strong so we could dominate others. We became strong so we could make sure no one else has to live in fear. He turned to face the full assembly. Power does not have to mean control. Strength can mean protection. The real measure of a civilization is not how long it has existed. It is how it uses the power it has. The chamber remained silent long after he finished speaking. For the first time in centuries, the elder species had no arguments left. No threats, no speeches, only a choice. Accept a new future, or watch the galaxy continue changing without them. Finally, High Arbiter Senthi spoke again. The vote will begin. One by one, the remaining civilizations registered their decisions. The results appeared on the massive display above the chamber. The numbers slowly climbed higher. Delegates leaned forward nervously, because something unprecedented was happening, something that had never happened in the entire history of the Galactic Accord. And when the final vote appeared, the result shocked everyone. For the first time in 600,000 years, every single civilization in the chamber voted the same way, and the galaxy changed forever. The Grand Conclave had witnessed countless votes during its long history. Wars had been approved here. Empires had been recognized here.
Entire civilizations had been punished or protected by decisions made in this chamber. But never, not once in 600,000 years, had every species voted the same way. Until now. The great display above the chamber slowly filled with glowing symbols as each civilization registered its decision. Delegates watched the numbers carefully. Some were hopeful, others were nervous. A few still looked angry. But one by one, the votes appeared. Yes, yes, yes. Even species that had once opposed humanity began choosing the same answer. The Torvan representatives hesitated longer than most. Their empire had once ruled through conquest and fear. Accepting these new rules meant giving up the power they had held for generations. But even they could see the truth. The galaxy had already begun changing. Refusing now would only leave them behind. Finally, the Torvan vote appeared. Yes. Then the Keth Collective registered their decision. Another yes. When the final vote appeared, the chamber remained silent for several seconds. The result was clear. Unanimous approval. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Accord, every single member civilization had voted the same way. The chamber exploded with noise, not the polite applause normally heard after diplomatic decisions. This was different. Representatives stood from their seats. Old enemies turned toward each other. Some species reached across the chamber to shake hands, claws, or tentacles. Others simply laughed in disbelief. It was chaotic, messy, emotional, but it was also something the Grand Conclave had not felt for a very long time. Hope. The Accord would change. The old system of elder rulers and obedient younger species would end. A new system, based on equality and cooperation, would begin. At the center of the chamber, Ambassador Oi watched the celebration quietly. He did not raise his arms. He did not make another speech. He simply nodded once toward High Arbiter Senthi. The ancient Dren returned the gesture slowly. For the first time in many years, the old Arbiter's eyes held something new: respect. After a few moments, Oi gathered his small collection of papers and turned toward the exit. The celebration continued behind him, but his work here was finished. Outside the chamber, a long corridor stretched toward the docking bays. Representatives from many species had been watching the vote through large display screens. As the human ambassador walked past them, the crowd parted quietly. Some bowed their heads. Others reached out gently to touch his sleeve in silent gratitude. Near the end of the corridor, a young Velethari diplomat stepped forward. She had been a child during the attack on her homeworld many years ago. Human soldiers had pulled her from the ruins of her city. Now she stood before the man who had helped change the galaxy. Her 6 silver eyes looked up at him. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Oi stopped walking. He looked through the large windows of the station at the endless field of stars outside. Millions of suns, billions of worlds, each one full of people who would soon learn the galaxy had changed. For a moment, he thought about everything humanity had endured: exile, silence, years of rebuilding, and the long road that had led to this moment. Then he smiled gently, but his answer would be the most important one yet. Standing beside the stars, Ambassador Oi finally answered the Velethari diplomat, and his simple response would define the future of the entire galaxy.
The young Velethari diplomat waited quietly. Her silver eyes reflected the distant stars outside the station windows. The galaxy stretched endlessly in front of them, thousands of bright lights scattered across the dark. Ambassador Josie Oi stood beside her for a moment without speaking. For decades he had carried the weight of humanity's exile.
He had watched his species rebuild itself from isolation, grow stronger, and prove something to the galaxy. Now the long struggle was finally over. Or perhaps it was only beginning. The young diplomat asked again softly, "What happens now?" Oy looked out at the stars. He thought about Earth. He thought about the quiet factories that had restarted after exile, the engineers who had worked for years in silence, the scientists who had redesigned alien technology, the pilots who had tested ships that were never meant to exist. He remembered Director Aminer Mangji, who had started Directive Zero but had not lived long enough to see its final success. He remembered Admiral Yuri Tanaka, whose calm voice had spoken humanity's rules during a battle that changed the galaxy. He remembered the Velithari children rescued from burning cities, and he remembered the moment, decades ago, when the galaxy had voted to throw humanity away. For a long time, the universe had believed humans were dangerous, but perhaps the galaxy had misunderstood what kind of danger humanity truly was. Oy finally turned back to the young diplomat. His expression was warm, gentle, hopeful. "Now," he said quietly, "we build something worth keeping." The Velithari woman tilted her head slightly. "What do you mean?" Oy gestured toward the stars outside the window. For hundreds of thousands of years, the galaxy believed power meant control. The strong ruled, the weak obeyed. That system lasted a very long time. He paused. But it was never fair, and systems that are not fair eventually break. The young diplomat nodded slowly. Oy continued. "What humanity showed the galaxy is simple. Strength does not have to mean domination. It can mean protection." He looked toward the distant lights again. "Every civilization will still have problems. We will still argue. We will still make mistakes." He smiled slightly. "That is what people do. But now the galaxy has a choice. We can compete without destroying each other. We can grow without enslaving each other. We can protect the small worlds that once had no voice." The Velithari woman stood quietly beside him. For the first time in her life, the future of the galaxy did not feel frightening. It felt open, full of possibilities. "Will it last?" she asked. Oy chuckled softly. "That depends on all of us." He stepped away from the window and began walking down the corridor again. Behind them, the Grand Conclave was still alive with celebration. Species that had once feared each other were now speaking together. Old enemies were becoming allies. It would not be perfect, nothing ever was, but it was a beginning. Far away, beyond the station windows, the stars continued shining. Each one held new worlds, new civilizations, new stories waiting to be written. And somewhere out there, someday, another species might look up at the night sky and wonder if the galaxy was safe, if the strong would protect them, if someone would answer when they called for help, and if they did, humanity would still be there, listening, watching, ready. Because some ideas never disappear. Freedom, fairness, and the simple promise humanity had carried across the stars. No one stands alone. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.